Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So in Lesson 2, we discussed budgeting. We had an introduction to income, expenses, worksheets, how to track those two things. And now we're going to talk about managing the budget, which is the fourth step. So how do you stay on budget when money's tight? It can be stressful. We've talked about that already in the first two lessons. We wanted to set up a financial wellness plan so that your goals would line up with your values. And it's difficult knowing how those values and your spending are going to line up and how the money will fit into all that. Right, on step 4, we're going to talk about managing that budget. So you've created it. How do you stick with it? And you have to remember that keeping track of expenses and income is going to be important going forward. It's not a one-time thing. And hopefully by creating this plan, you're going to be aware of the decisions you make, and you'll realize that you're in control of how to spend your money, and it will all be in your control because of technology and living within your means. Again, I'll say it again, making sure the income coming in covers what's going out. Live within those means, ensure that that's the case. Right? Values, what are they? So in simple terms, it's your judgment of what is important in the way you live, work, and manage your money, and what's most important to you. And again, these values should determine your priorities, all of your priorities in life, but in our discussion here, your financial priorities and your goals, your financial goals, and therefore your financial wellness. Here are some examples of values. Family, loyalty, responsibility, right? And then travel, the environment, right? So all of these are going to be important in one way or another, some to some people more than others. But again, your financial goals should be created and your budget should be followed such that these values are met. Okay, know the difference. This is an interesting discussion. You hear people all the time saying things like, ooh, I need that jacket, right? But as far as I'm concerned, well, depending on the situation, that's most likely not a need. A need is something we really can't live without. And they're often fixed costs, and they will probably remain the same amount every month. So, for example, rent, utilities, insurance, gas, transportation, personal care, medication, and as we've discussed several times now, emergency savings, right? Those, as far as I'm concerned, are real needs. A want is something we desire but could probably live without, and they're changing, and they often happen as a result of emotion, right? So a vacation, a cute new pair of shoes, or the new Jordans that just came out, the latest phone, a Netflix account, cable, right? So I think the cartoon on the right from before, I think this differentiation between needs and wants helps determine what her proper choice is. Okay, on the next slide, tips for sticking to your budget. We've discussed some of these. I think the budget does, again, a nice job of helping you avoid temptation and avoid those purchases that you probably shouldn't make because you know you shouldn't make them. But it also makes you feel okay about those purchases that you have to make or that are reasonable as long as they're in your budget. And there's tips on how to shop smartly as well. So look for opportunities to cut expenses. Maybe a good start is to list 2 or 3 items you can live without. Make a list of all your expenses and decide, okay, of all these expenses, which ones do I not really care about? Maybe I'm used to paying them, but maybe it's not a good time to be paying for these right now. Limit the use of credit cards. Credit cards, first of all, can get you into trouble, but also sometimes feel like you're getting things for free. If you limit the use of these credit cards, it often helps. Especially impulse purchases. One slight side benefit of COVID-19 is not a lot of things are open. So other than delivery, there's not a lot you can go shopping for. Maybe use this time to determine what was important to you and what wasn't, and maybe it'll help reduce some of those unwanted expenses. It'll also hopefully this time will help you realize what subscriptions have been unnecessary. I hear jokes all the time about people that have every streaming site under the sun. It's unlikely you need all of them, right? This time might help you determine which ones you can get rid of. And don't over-prepare, meaning you don't have to go buy thousands of everything just because everyone else is doing it. It's a good time to remain calm, to determine what things you need in the short term, and to maybe save some money by not buying some of those impulse purchases. Stay on track. Additional suggestions, in particular when times are tough, depending on your landlord or others that are loaning you money, or some of the companies to whom you pay subscriptions, they often might be willing to at least delay payments for a month or two, depending on your financial situation. Also, I think because this is all based on a pandemic, it makes us all think about our medical coverage and insurance policies, right? So now might be a good time, especially since we don't have a lot to do, to review our current situation and what payment options are being offered that we might not have thought about. And the third point is an interesting one for me because I love going out to eat, but cooking meals at home is obviously something that is better for the community as a whole. And I tell you, I've been saving so much money since I've been cooking at home, and it turns out I really like it. So this one silver lining of this environment, or this experience for me, is that stay with your current device. It may meet your needs during an emergency. I think just understanding what you have at your disposal will help you determine whether or not you're covered. Keep track of accumulated debt. Now, depending on your situation, borrowing isn't necessarily bad. It's often the only way to pay for something. Like, for example, if you buy a house, in most cases, people need a mortgage. That's debt. But depending on your financial situation, how much income you have coming in, and the cost of that debt every month, it might not be a bad thing. And it will help establish credit, right? But if you have too much, so if you're using some sort of credit instrument that's got a really high interest rate, or if you're way overextended, if you have way too much debt, then it can become a problem. And if you don't stay current on interest payments, it's going to destroy your credit, which means that you won't have the ability to borrow in the future, right? So it's important to understand how much debt you have, what kind of debt you have, make sure those payments are being made, or else you're going to have troubles in the future. And also, a budget will help reduce your chance of borrowing dramatically. Now, regarding retail, we discussed before about streaming, right? Cancel a subscription if you don't need it. Clothing stores are very good about getting you to sort of buy into their plans using credit cards or whatever else. Just be careful and manage those. Use cash versus debit or credit cards because it makes it feel like real money. And it also is a finite amount of money that you know you're going to spend, right? If you have a credit card and you walk into a store, it almost seems limitless. Whereas if you have a little bit of money and only that money can be spent, it sort of keeps a top on how much you can spend. And I discussed this before about keeping receipts. Receipts are a great way for you to track your expenses. Yes, I do it on a daily basis for things where there aren't receipts. But the big purchases, using a credit card where there are receipts, can be incredibly helpful on knowing exactly how much money is going out the door. And negotiate your bills. I've heard from many people that when they get charges that they're not comfortable with, often they'll call the store or the subscription provider and work something out. These people are financially motivated, but they'll do what they can to keep you as a customer. Okay, key takeaways. We have reviewed a lot during this lesson, but we hope that you can take these few things away. Understand your values. Know the difference between needs and wants. Look for opportunities to save money and cut expenses. keep track of your accumulated debt, and be a smart consumer. Okay, thank you all for listening. Join us next time for our lesson on creating your emergency fund. And if you're interested to learn more about helpful shopping tips, look out for our upcoming lesson on shopping smart.